Before I can teach you the rail toe spin, I need to do a little bit of a preamble and explain something. See, a while back I did a video on the rail whip, and at the start of that I introduced the concept of pure technique, which is an idea or even an ideology that was drilled into me by my old judo sensei many years ago. And I'll spare you the full breakdown of it. If you want that, go watch the rail whip video. But it really applies here, or at least it's important to take into account here. The basic gist of it is that with any trick, any motion, any throw in the judo case, there is a pure way of doing it. The best possible motion, the best possible hand position or foot position or whatever, to make it as effortless as possible. Only by learning and understanding the pure technique will you then be able to understand and easily learn the variants on it. Now, the reason it came up in the rail whip video is that there are many different ways of doing a rail whip, and the version that I do and the version that I taught isn't necessarily the pure technique. Now, that could be the case with the rail toe spin as well, because there are many different ways of doing this trick, but I don't have all the time in the world, so I can only teach you one. The first variable to consider is which way round you want the board to be, because obviously you've got heel side and you've got toe side. Now, technically speaking, you can do a toe spin on either side of the board, and some people do. But for various reasons, the heel side version is a lot easier. The reason most people will find the heel side version easier is down to the way your foot has to move throughout this trick. The problem you're going to run into is making sure you don't get stuck on the board. Now, as such, you want to try and pull your toes in, a bit like you're doing a rail whip. Now, if you're on the heel side, as you spin round like that, you should stay relatively well centered over the axle. You should stay in balance. When you flip the board over, you've got to start a lot further back. You've got a lot further to get round, and your weight distribution is going to be totally different. You're way more likely to topple the board over and fall out of rail from a toe side position. The next variable to consider is if you want to spin around your front leg or your back leg. Now, it doesn't actually matter which one you choose. When you're in rail, there is no real idea of a switch rail trick. No one's going to notice if you go front leg instead of back leg or vice versa. So whichever feels more comfortable, go with it. Now, if you've already learned rolling toe spins, you're probably going to be better spinning on your front leg. If you haven't learned them yet, why not? I've already done a video for those. I've already done a full trick tip. And I think they're a little bit easier than rail toe spins. Your mileage may vary. Now, if you are a Mongo pusher, there's a good chance you're going to feel more stable spinning on your back leg just because it's the one you're used to standing on. Denim Hill does them that way, and it actually opens up a few doors. It opens up a few new options. So don't feel too dirty and ashamed of being a Mongo pusher at this point. There are some advantages, obviously. So having dealt with heel side versus toe side, front foot versus back foot, we're almost ready to go. There's just one more variable left, and that's spin rotation. Now, this is where that whole pure technique thing I was talking about really comes into play, because 99% of people who do rail toe spins will spin front side. Although that gets a bit confusing because spinning front side around the front foot is the same technique as spinning back side around the back foot, but spins are confusing. We'll say front side. If you're going off the back foot, you're really going back side. Don't overthink it. The reason most people will do it front side on this trick is because you can push off harder. You get your front foot in position and you're pushing off with that leg and winding into it. Now, as you can see, it moves the board slightly. It's very, very rare you'll see someone do this and not kick the board out a little bit. As such, there is the argument that the pure technique on this is to actually spin the other way. So you're turning into the spin. As a result, you're not pushing off this leg as much, and the board stays still. Is it cleaner? Maybe. Is it better? Not really. The problem with going inwards, with going backside, is that you tend to end up way more off center. And you also, because you don't have this push off the board to get started, you tend to go a lot slower. The few people who do it this way tend to be really just slow. And yeah, it looks more controlled. Yeah, it might technically be cleaner. It never looks quite as good. It's never as snappy. The entrance is never as fast. It doesn't link very well with anything. So in this example, the pure technique, debatably pure technique, we're actually going to ignore it. So if you want to learn them inwards, if you want to spin backside, go ahead. If that's the most comfortable way for you, cool. But I'm going to be teaching the front side one. And as a result, we're going to have a couple of issues to deal with. Your starting position for a rail toe spin is just a rail stand. Just a nice, strong, sturdy, and comfortable rail stand. What you do with your non-spinning foot, in this case the back foot, totally irrelevant. Just make sure that's as stable as possible. The other foot, however, this one is crucial. You've got to bring it back to a point where your toes are only just sticking past the end of the wheel. You want to be able to spin freely like this, lifting your heel up so that you're not trapping the deck underneath the foot. If this looks like the start to a rail whip, it probably should, because they're basically the same idea. The only difference is here, we're going to spin instead of the board. Now, also like the rail whip, what you want to try and do to make this a little bit easier is build the height of your setup up. The gap between the deck and the wheel is crucial. The further this distance is, the taller the setup is, the more stable it's going to be in rail, but also the more room you'll have to get your foot through this gap without getting stuck on the wood. One trick that I have seen someone do is actually gouging away this part of the deck, thinning this out, with sandpaper or, whatever. I don't recommend that. You don't need to do that. It will work, but the easier answer is just put more risers in or use taller trucks. It increases your rail stability and it will make this easier overall. When you've got that foot position figured out and dialed in, the mechanics of the trick actually aren't that dissimilar to a regular toe spin, i.e. a rolling one. Same basic idea. You pre-wind your body in the opposite direction, you bring your arms across, and as everything comes back into line, you lift up the back foot. Now the catch, of course, is that the balance is totally different. And also, to get the rotation on a regular toe spin, you push off with the back foot. Now, if you do that too much in rail, this happens. The board's going to spin like crazy in the opposite direction. As I was saying earlier, that's why a lot of people have issue with this technique. The more that board moves, the more that board spins, the worse this trick is going to look. Worst case scenario, you end up with this disgusting half and half, where you spin the board 180 and you do a 180 in the opposite direction. That is not what you want to do. So, the key is figuring out just how much you can push off with that foot to make sure you get the minimum amount of rotation of the board while still getting your body round. Now, that obviously spun a little bit, but what you can also see is that as I finish the rotation, I can bring this foot down, trapping the board and dragging it around with me to get back to my original starting position. It's not ideal, but it should help you keep this as clean as possible. To be honest, the biggest factor in this trick, aside from foot placement, is actually the board itself. Every element of your skateboard is going to have an influence over how simple this trick feels to you. Now, the most obvious one is freestyle wheels. You need something that covers the axle nut. If you can feel the axle nut underneath your foot, you're not going to spin cleanly. By this point, if you've been following this YouTube channel, if you've been following this website, wherever you're getting this video, these should be obvious. Just get some freestyle wheels. But everything else plays a factor as well. A wider board will need a much taller setup to feel stable in rail. If you're skating a low undercarriage on a very wide deck, everything becomes very, very tipsy. So if you're skating an 8-inch, a 9-inch, a 20-inch, the trucks need to be much taller. The risers need to be much taller to accommodate that. The other factor is the actual tightness of your trucks. Most people who do a lot of stationary tricks have rock solid trucks, and they do so for good reason. I skate fairly turny trucks with much softer bushings, and that makes this really awkward. Trying to film some of these, I could feel the truck actually turning underneath my foot. You've got to bear in mind your weight is shifting very quickly around that, and it doesn't take much to twist out of place. And when that happens, the board collapses and everything just kind of falls over, including you. So if rail tricks is something you really, really want to get into, skate a narrower deck, make sure you've got freestyle wheels, get some trucks that don't turn, and put some stiff ass bushings in them. That'll make this so much simpler. So you've gone through the checklist. You've got the foot position right. You understand which way you're going to spin. You're lifting your toes up, you're lifting your heel up. Nothing's touching the board as you spin. You're not kicking it too far behind you. Your board setup doesn't suck. Your deck isn't too wide. The floor is flat and level and not a roller coaster. And yet you still can't make this work? The last one on the checklist, the last hurdle to cross, and that is staying centered. Anything where you spin, whether it's these or regular toe spins or just 360s on the back wheels or 360 ollies, you need to stay centered. I'm fond of talking about how the body is a lever. Whatever happens here is mirrored down at the other end. As you lean forward, you're pushing things behind you and vice versa. In a spin, it's even more important to keep that in check. If I get on this board and I think, oh yeah, let's do a toe spin, but I start leaning forward as I do it, all that happens is I push the board away. I can't stay balanced. Earlier I mentioned that rolling toe spins are probably easier. Now, some people watching this might disagree, but they have the benefit of using momentum to help keep you in position on the board. That rolling momentum goes a long way. You also have a much more stable and solid position to stand on. You don't have those in a rail toe spin. You have an inherently unstable base and no momentum to keep you locked in, to counteract this rotation, to counteract any lean. So if you're still struggling to get these, go back, learn the original toe spin, learn the rolling toe spin, because the same skills will transfer and it will make this feel a lot easier.